What's going on, guys? We are back at it again with another companion video here on the channel. Before I get into what this video is all about though, I do want to say really fast that I do have a pretty sizable playlist for ESO in terms of a Let's Play playlist. If you guys are interested in that, a link to the channel where I do Let's Plays will be in the description down below. So if you guys are interested in watching a Let's Play on ESO, where I basically go through as many quests as I humanly possibly can, definitely go over there to my Let's Play channel, give that a subscription, and you will be getting weekly ESO videos, which is a game that I absolutely love and adore. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this video. This video is about Bastian as a Frost Staff tank. Now, I've scoured the internet and I haven't found any good content in terms of companion builds that that are involved with him having a Frost Staff. So I wanted to make a tank where he actually uses a Frost Staff. Now, just to be clear, it is typically better to run a Sword and Shield on your companion if you want to run him or her as a tank. But personally speaking, I like to run this specific build for Bastian, mainly because it is more lore friendly since he does love magic, and it just makes more sense. So with that being said, let's go ahead into his skills and find out what I'm running for him. Alright guys, so right off the bat, we can see the skills right here on the bottom right. To start off on my number 1 bar, I actually have Destructive Blast, which is absolutely essential if you're going to be running a Frost Staff tank, seeing as the Frost Blast taunts the enemy for 15 seconds. Now, we'll get into the gear in a second, but I do have a couple of a couple of quickened trait items on him so that we were able to lower the cooldown to 15.2 seconds. Now, I'm not really worried about the 0.2 seconds since you can't really even tell most of the time where they lose taunt, which is absolutely fantastic. It works out perfectly in my personal opinion. Now, if you want to run the more optimal run, again, it is better to run one hand and shield, because Provoke has an exact 15-second cooldown, which also has the 15-second taunt. So it literally has the capabilities of having 100% uptime without having any quickened gear on. So you're able to invest in either bolstered or vigorous or any other trait that you think might run better on your build. Personally speaking, again, I like the Destruction Staff for the simple purpose of that Frost Staff appeal for Bastian, since he does like magic. So personally speaking, having a couple of quickened traits is imperative for this, because he will lose taunt if you run no quickened traits. But again, I'll get into the gear in a moment. So this is your taunt. I'll say it again, it's absolutely imperative, because a tank without a taunt is not really a tank in this game. Just basically the way the game runs in terms of being a tank. Moving on, however, we have Ritual of Salvation. What Ritual of Salvation does is for 8 seconds, it actually puts down a rune on the floor that reduces their the damage that they're receiving by 20%. But it's not just for him, it's also for any of the allies who stand within the rune, but really, you don't really need it since he's working as a tank himself, so it actually works out great. Also, if the attacker is undead or Daedra or a werewolf, the rune reduces an additional 20% of damage reduction, which ends up being a total of 40%, which is absolutely fantastic. Again, that part of this skill is very circumstantial. However, the bare minimum of being 20% damage reduction from every other enemy works out very good in my opinion. And we'll take Bastian out to solo a boss fight and see how he does, but in a second, after we get through all of this. Moving on, however, we have Kindle. This is a very fast, as you can see, he has a 7.6 cooldown with our quickened traits. And it actually works out great because he has 8,700 of health that he heals every 7 seconds, which ends up being a very quick burst heal that he's able to, quickly turn around whenever he's needed. And again, for it being a very quick turnaround heal, it may not be a very huge heal, but because it happens so frequently, it ends up being very, very useful. So I highly recommend this for your Bastian tank. Moving on is your Basalt Barrier. This is a fantastic shield that absorbs damages not just for Bastian but also nearby allies of 4,350 damage for an entire 6 seconds. Now, it's not a huge shield by any means, but anything that can reduce damage for any amount of time will help with the survivability of Bastian. So while the damage shield holds as well, it is able to he's able to heal every single time someone heals him. It'll be increased by an additional 15%, the potency of the heal itself. So it is a great skill for him to have, so that you're able to have him not only have a damage shield, but also have the potency of your heals towards him to be more meaningful, more potent, more powerful. So I think this is a very necessary skill for him to have on his bar. And of course, Drake's Blood. This, honestly, I put it on every single one of my companion builds for Bastian, in particular, because it is such a good skill. Bastian has the ability to heal for 25% of their max health. That is very important with this build specifically, because he already has a pretty high damage or high health pool, considering what or comparing to other builds and stuff like that. So it is a very good skill to have. And not only that, but it also reduces the damage taken by 20% while they have this skill active. So for a full 8 seconds, not only will you have the Ritual of Salvation 20% damage reduction, but you will also have the damage reduction from Drake's Blood, which is also healing you as well. So not only do you have that 20 and 20, that's 40%, plus you have that heal. So it is a very good way to reduce damage for Bastian. Last but not least, in terms of skills, you have Unleashed Rage, which is Bastian's ultimate, and his only ultimate, to be honest, but it's a very powerful one, since he curls up into a little ball and explodes, dealing 13,441 damage to nearby enemies and stuns them for 4 seconds, while also releasing a couple of lines, or 4 lines, that also deals an additional damage to people who are in the way of said lines by an additional 3,359 flame damage to everyone that's hit by it. This is a pretty powerful skill to have, or ultimate to have, on Bastian. It doesn't get activated as much as I wish he did, only because he's a little bit more of a ranged build, seeing as he is a Frost Staff build, right? He may be a tank and all, but he still generally just still attacks from a distance if he doesn't have his taunt activated. So there's that. As far as skills goes, this is a pretty good skill set in my opinion. I've tested it numerous amount of times, and it's personally my favorite way to run Bastian. So there's that. Moving on to his gear, however, in terms of gear, I like to run my companions in the typical fashion of how you would build your own character, 2 sets of 5 and a monster set of 2. So I like to have that mentality going. So because of this, my first quote-unquote first set of 5 is actually all heavy armor in the vigorous trait, which reduces 2.6 damage, or which increases the health by 2.6%, excuse me. So as you can see, all of these are purpled out because it has the highest percentage of increased health, and also increased armor. So it really does help Bastian in this sense. And as I've said before, we are running the 2-piece set of Quickened, and this is, in my opinion, I wouldn't say it's imperative to the build, but it is pretty important to the build, because without this, you will have an overlap of like, I think it's like 7 seconds or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But it's like a few seconds of overlap from where you have a taunt to where you don't have a taunt for Bastian. So those few seconds in between could be the difference of the boss or whatever it is you're fighting to come and do damage to not just you, but also your nearby enemies. So the fact that just 2 pieces of Quickened is able to reduce it to 15.2 seconds is pretty good, because that 0.2 seconds really isn't felt in combat when you're fighting a boss or something like that. Bastian is typically able to keep the taunt for the majority, if not all, of the time that he has a taunt active. So that's 2 of the sets right now. We have the 5-piece Vigorous sets and the 2-piece Quickened. So for the last set is the bolstered set, right? So we have the jewelry, the rings and the necklace, and of course the bolstered ice staff. I typically switch off between bolstered and high health, or the Vigorous set in this slot or whatever, depending on what I want him to be doing. If he's taking a lot of damage, sometimes I'll just swap into the Vigorous trait, rings, necklace, and the frost staff, and it sometimes works better. Sometimes it also works better with the bolstered, which is normally how I have him running. However, if you want to take advantage of the Drake's Blood heal as much as you possibly can, you're probably better off going with the Vigorous trait, since he would be able to heal substantially more with his Drake's Blood skill. In terms of outfit, I basically just have him with the Battle Mage Tribune armor, since it makes him look a little bit like an Ice Mage. And then in terms of dyes, all I have is the Cyrodiil. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's the Cyrodiil dye, steel dye or whatever it is, and then of course the Covenant blue. And that's basically the build. So with that being said, let's go over to a world boss and watch him solo and see how he does. And there you have it, guys. At the end of that boss fight, Bastian did get a little help from a couple of other players, but you know what? That's fine. He still did exactly what I needed him to do, and that is being a tank. He survived it just fine. He was able to keep his heals up, as you guys saw. His health did get a little bit low, but he managed to keep it up because of Kindle, which is why I was saying that that skill is pretty important, because he is able to turn it around very quickly. So he's able to keep his health up really fast. Now, if he was taking more damage, that's when I was saying that it would probably be better for him to run the Vigorous trait, but for the most part, it is 100% okay with running the bolstered trait. He has reduced damage, and it is exactly what you need him to do. So reduce damage, have higher health, and keep taunt, and he does all of that just fine. So that is going to do it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed this one, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.